Welcome back to The Right Ingredients, the podcast where we unpack the essential elements of successful recruitment and leadership in the specialty ingredients world. I'm Charlie Packwood, Managing Director here at Aston Chambers, and today we're delighted to be joined by Luke Willis. Luke spent 18 years in the British Army, developing leaders at every level, and now works with managers and entrepreneurs to help them become authentic, confident, and effective leaders. His coaching focuses on building clarity, resilience, and influence, all things that matter just as much in business as they do in the interview room. Now, while Luke doesn't come from the specialty ingredients industry, leadership and confidence are universal. Whether you're running a global team or stepping into an interview for, say, a senior technical role, how you lead yourself and others can make all of the difference. Luke, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Luke, let's start with your own journey. How did your time in the military shape your views on leadership and what made you move into coaching?
Yeah, so currently still serving. I'm still in the army now, 18 years in. And yeah, obviously a lot of experiences over an 18-year career, going through the ranks at a young age. I joined at 17, left school, joined the army at 17, and had a, good exposure to leadership from an early age. I deployed to Iraq when I was 18, so not long after my basic training. And, you got to see some good examples of sort of real life leadership in the most high pressure environments. So I was exposed to that at a young age. And to be honest, as I came through the ranks, I just learned more and more about leadership. I would say probably in the last 4 or 5 years, it's something that I've been really, became like a passion of mine really. And I really started to understand more about people and really started to understand that it's all about skills. Like it's about people skills. And people say, you've got these natural born leaders and stuff. And nobody, in my opinion, is naturally born a leader. It's through experience and skills that they develop in order to become that leader that, people all of a sudden go, oh, he's just naturally born that way. But that's not the case. I really, as I say, I took a real keen interest in it about 4 or 5 years ago. Started reading some books and just really starting to develop my own skills as a leader. In terms of coaching then, I sort of knew about 3 years ago probably that when I left the army, which I've got about 4.5 years left, that I knew I was going to go into something to do with leadership. I just felt like that was my passion. It felt like something I was aligned to. I didn't really want to leave the army and start a new career in another service. It's quite common for people to leave the army and, go and join the police or any other essential service and sort of restart a career. And that's great for a lot of people. It just wasn't for me. I just knew that I was wanting to pursue something different for myself, and I knew it was about leadership. I didn't know what that looked like, but I just knew it was about leadership. Mm-hmm. And then I would say probably a couple of years ago, the penny started dropping on, I say this all the time. I have these sort of moments in life where the penny just drops and you get this moment of clarity. And then as those build up, things become more and more clear to you. And yeah, so just speaking to people who used to be in the army and stuff, and a lot of them said a lot of nice things to me in terms of what they thought about my leadership. And, it got me thinking that, having developed these leadership skills, it would be such a shame to not put them to good use. And then when I started speaking to business owners and people outside the army, friends of mine who were in businesses, found themselves getting promoted into senior roles or actually taking over businesses, these people knew the system, knew how to operate within that business at a sort of operational level. However, when it came to leading, they didn't really have any idea what to do. So a lot of them were coming to me for a bit of advice, and I found myself having these deep conversations. And a lot of people would say to me like, look, you really sort of know what you're doing here. And I was like, the penny started to drop, as I said. And I realized that the army is just the same as any other organization. And if you can nail these leadership skills, it doesn't matter what organization you're in, all this stuff is transferable. So I then realized that this is something I can take with the knowledge and experience that I've got. I can take that into the business world outside the army and really help these leaders that are struggling, because I'm also conscious that when I speak to these people, they don't have all this development training that we may have in the army, this leadership and development programs. They're just expected to go into these leadership roles and deliver results. Yeah, that's sort of where I want to come in now and bridge that gap.
And since sort of outside of the military world and looking into sort of the business world of people that you've spoken to, what's some of the biggest misconceptions about leadership that you often see carried into the business environment?
Well, I can definitely tell you the biggest misconception, or one of, certainly in the army, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be the same in the business world. Everyone thinks that the loudest person in the room is either the most important or the leader. Everyone thinks that to be the leader, you've got to be the loudest, which is a complete misconception. Like that is not the case at all. And actually, I would say the opposite. I think that in order to be a very good leader, you need to be better at listening than actually talking. Now, there's going to be times where you need to stand up and you need to say your piece, of course. And communication skills is obviously a massive part of leadership, but we often overlook the listening part of it. So I would say that one of the biggest misconceptions is about being that loudest, being at the front, sort of shouting. That I've often used the analogy about the Braveheart speeches and stuff, because I once used to think that way as well. When I was a young lance corporal or corporal in the army, I thought the more that I shout at people, the better I am as a leader, which in my opinion is completely not true.
Yeah, I see that one all the time in a variety of different environments, both in the recruitment industry where I operate in and also within the business world. So yeah, I entirely agree on that one, that it isn't always about being the loudest in the room. It's about having the know-how to lead people more than anything. I think plenty of people move into management. I mean, there's a lot of people that will further their career by then taking on the additional responsibilities of management. But that doesn't always mean they're leading effectively. From your perspective, what are the key differences between managing and leading? Let's break it down a little bit more here.
Yeah, so I would say that managing, now I get asked this a lot, and I actually have a lot of debates over this as well, because a lot of people have, different misconceptions about leadership and management and what's the differences. And to be honest, a lot of it can be quite subjective. Now, some people can think that's good leadership, that's bad leadership. And at the end of the day, good leaders are conscious that they are always developing. So there's never a perfect example of that is how a leader should be, because a real leader knows that he's not perfect and he has got room for improvement and he's always trying to develop his skills. I always say that leadership is very subjective, and a lot of people think that's good leadership. A lot of people think that's good leadership, shouting and screaming, whatever it may be. And everyone has their own opinion on it. Now, my opinion and what I believe to be the differences between management and leadership is management focuses on processes which take place within an organization in order to deliver results. So as a manager, you find yourself in that position by default, by promotion, whatever it may be, you are in that position by some sort of default. However, leadership is a choice. You choose to be a leader within that role. And leadership is all about managing the people and looking after the people that deliver those results within that business or that organization. So the differences being management is overseeing the process, leadership is overseeing the people that carry out the process and deliver the results.
I like what you said about management and leadership, the differences there, because I think that's really key in a lot of places where people are taking on what they define as leadership positions, but then sometimes it is just management. It is just administration more than anything, rather than delegation. I think where your knowledge could be very valuable here, especially to our industry, take someone who is transitioning from a technical role. They are scientific. They have spent a lot of their time studying to get to where they are at. They haven't been somebody that is constantly speaking to people, sales types, if you will, and they're moving into their first management position. What practical steps could you give to help them grow into a true leader rather than what I said as just an administrator?
So I would say the first thing that that person needs to do is it requires a mindset shift. When you go from being the person on the operating level to actually being in charge of people, it requires that mindset shift to switch from I'm no longer in the thick of it, I'm no longer getting hands-on. I need to look after the people that are doing that thing. And the way that I summarize it, and it's very simple, Charlie, like people really overcomplicate it when it comes to leadership. It's just all about people. It's all about people skills. It's about being a human. It's about human skills. And if you can work on them, you will become a much better leader. And that's how you end up becoming the leader that you want to be, is working on those human skills. You're not focusing on, yes, you will be focused on the result and the outcomes, the outputs of the business, the organization. But when you look after the people, they will naturally, by default, get you those results anyway. So stop focusing so much on the process when you get to that leadership role and focus on the people. And as I said, it requires that mindset shift. So what I would say in terms of practical tools that they can start doing is really start to look at people skills, really enhancing those skills, learning how to listen effectively, how to communicate effectively, understanding people's behaviors, how people react differently to orders, to the way they're spoken to, how people want to be treated. Everyone has, different things that make them tick. What are the intrinsic motivators of the people that work within this organization? Because I often say to people, like, especially in the business world, and I work with so many people in terms of my clients that are in this world, and I sort of think it's unique that I come from an objective perspective. I've never been in a corporate business. I've never worked in all these businesses that, my clients work in. But because I bring this objective perspective, I think it just sort of shines an outside light. I'm not using all these corporate buzzwords and stuff. I'm just saying the real life situation on how it is. And yeah, I would say that when they work on these skills and really just focus on how to be better with people, that would be the best thing that they can do sort of to start out on their journey to being leaders.
Great advice. Thank you for that. I think where I also felt our listeners could get a lot of insight from you and your expertise is bringing this to the interview room. An interview is often less about what's on your CV and more about how someone really carries themselves. From your coaching, what are the most effective ways to project confidence without crossing into the world of arrogance?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. And I guess confidence can be sort of mistaken for that arrogance, but
all the time, yeah.
The way that I would say that to become confident, that I've got sort of like a framework on this, and it's something that's a mastermind session that I do with my clients, and it's called the confidence shift. And there's a number of different steps that you can take in order to gain confidence. But I would say for someone going into an interview room, I always say that competence builds confidence. So ensure that when you're going into that interview, know what you're talking about. Do your homework on the organization. Do your homework on that business. Do your homework on the person that's interviewing you. Get to understand who that person is. Understand what that business, understand everything. Do as much as you can. And really, that will set you in there to go in with confidence, because you're naturally going to build competence having that subject matter knowledge. So you actually understand everything. Even this day and age, when you just put in that little bit of extra effort, in my opinion, people notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the two key characteristics of any good leader that I always say is having good attitude and putting in the effort. If you've got attitude and effort, and that can show in an interview room to an employer, then everything else that you might need to learn about going into that role, I would say that you don't need to be a subject matter expert on the role you're going into, because even now in the army, I change roles every 2 to 3 years. When I go into a new role, I don't have a clue about that job. I've not done that job. I've done a number of other roles before that. Now I'm in a certain role that's got to do with logistics. I'm like, I don't know anything about logistics. That doesn't make me a bad leader. That doesn't make me have poor attitude and effort, because once I've got that attitude and effort, the actual job itself, I can learn as I go down the road. So I would say going into the interview room, just the way you're going to be confident is being competent, and just show that you've got that right attitude. You're going to put in the effort, and I believe that everything else can be learned further down the line. But yeah, that's what I would say.
For sure. Preparation is key for every interview that anybody is going into, whether it is a leadership position or not. Preparing, knowing the company, knowing the people that you're going to be speaking to, all of that is, real key critical information there for anybody going into an interview. On the flip side of that, Luke, what about for people that maybe get a little bit nervous when all eyes are on them? What tools can people use, or mindset shifts can they use when they're nervous about going into such an interview?
So I would say that the most important thing to do is, don't get inside your own head. When you're put on the spot, a lot of people I help people with is public speaking and stuff as well. And as I said before, the competence part is what's going to really build that confidence. When you actually know what you're going to talk about, and you may have rehearsed it, whatever it may be. And I'll give an example of this. Is I've been best man a few times, and for those who've been best man before, they know that the pressures that come with that. Having to stand up, you're expected to make everyone laugh. You're the sort of you steal the show for however long you're doing that speech for. I've been best man 3 times. This is like hire a best man type thing over here. Should start charging for it. But on the 3rd time I was best man, it was for one of my best mates who I've known pretty much my whole life. And I hadn't prepared anywhere near as much as I had previously. And when I stood up, I actually I didn't crumble, but I was very nervous. And it was It was very obvious. I fumbled my words a few times. I was nowhere near as funny as I thought it was going to be. And I just assumed and sort of had the arrogance that because I know him, I don't really have to prepare. I'm just going to be able to go out there and smash it. And I was so wrong. And to be honest, afterwards, I was a little bit embarrassed. And even my missus came up to me and was like, "Luke, that's not like you. You really showed your nerves there and stuff." And I was like, I didn't prepare. So, I would always tell, like what was discussed before, when preparation builds that competence, and that's going to give you more confidence when you go into these situations.
Strong leaders are often defined by how they react under pressure, as you've mentioned there, from best men speeches, things like that. Under pressure, strong leaders can find their resolve. In both leadership roles and interviews, composure is surely tested as well. So what's your advice for handling difficult questions or scenarios without losing confidence?
I would say the most important thing, and this is something that I tell all my clients, is just be authentic. When you try to be someone that you're not, when you try to speak like someone that you're not, it can be noticed. It's noticeable. And people think that, I'm going to go to this interview, similar to me on this podcast with you now. Maybe I'm expected to speak a certain way. Maybe I'm expected to use certain language. At the end of the day, if you turn up as your authentic self, I think people are going to respect that more. And by doing that, you're not trying to be anyone else. You're not trying to put an act on, which is more difficult, because when you start fumbling, that's when the nerves are going to kick in, because you're trying to be someone you're not. And naturally, when you get it wrong, you're going to start getting nervous. So if you just be your authentic self, and as I said, make sure that you're prepared and don't try and bluff people. If someone asks you a difficult question that you need to think about it, then take that pause. That pause in your head is nowhere near what you think it is in reality. You think, oh my God, I've been sat here like in silence for ages. But in reality, it's not. And when you pause, when you're speaking, it allows people to actually register what you're saying. So don't expect to just start rattling all this information off and being like, I'm going to impress them with all these fancy words. Like, if you get asked a difficult question and you're on the spot, pause, think about it, and reply with authenticity and be yourself.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are scared of the awkward silence. And it seems like it's a silent pause that goes on in your head for like at least a minute, but really it's 5-6 seconds at most. I think pausing and being able to think, take on what's being said to you, and then giving your response. For me, I think that shows a lot more resolve, a lot more strength in an interview, in a conversation, because you're really taking in what's being said to you and then giving your response. I think that's really, really good advice there. What about vulnerability? Is there a way for leaders to show vulnerability in interviews that actually builds credibility rather than undermines it?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think all the top leaders, all the best leaders show vulnerability, and it's about showing that you're human. Like I said at the start, like leadership is all about human skills. It's about people, and it's also about emotion, and it's how we make people feel. And that's the way I summarize it. And when people say like, what do you mean leadership's about emotion? Well, when you think back to anyone that you've admired in terms of a leader or someone that's been in a leadership role and how they've made you feel, it's always down to emotion. When you go to a restaurant and the waiter comes over, no matter how good or bad the food is, if that waiter has made you feel valued and good about yourself, you're going to give them a bigger tip, regardless of how the food is. If they make you feel like crap and they make you feel not valued, you're not going to tip them very well. So that's an analogy that I like to use in terms of when I mix emotion with leadership, and that's sort of what I mean by it. All the best leaders are super conscious that they're not perfect. Nobody is the complete leader. They're always room for improvement. They're always developing. And that's what makes them great leaders. And acknowledging that and welcoming that feedback is almost like a bit of a vulnerability. And I would definitely say that is a strength. And if you can show that in an interview, I think that that's only going to work in your favor, because not everyone's perfect. Don't try to be, don't pretend to be, because people will see through it, because the people that are delivering that interview, they're not perfect either. They know that they've got a lot of things that they need to work on. And a lot of people that are uncoachable, is sort of like what we say in the coaching world. They tend to be the people that are nowhere near as good a leader as the people that remain coachable. So I think that just having the understanding that you don't know everything, you don't pretend to know everything, but you're willing to learn. And it comes back from that attitude and effort piece. So I think by showing that vulnerability, but backing it up with good attitude and showing that you're willing to put the effort in order to overcome that vulnerability, I think that's what matters more.
Yeah, fantastic. Being vulnerable on any element and wanting and willing to learn. Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice to show that vulnerability into a strength more than anything. What about this one? If you could give one piece of advice to candidates in our industry, the specialty ingredients, people who are specialists, but maybe not natural leaders, although I hate to use the word natural leaders, as you said, you already don't like it, but what should they focus on to show leadership potential in an interview?
Show that you care about people. As I've said, like throughout the podcast, it's all about people. So if they show that they have empathy, they have all the right characteristics that is required of a leader to go into that role, and they actually care about people, that is going to put them in a great position. As I said, businesses, these organizations, a lot of people focus on the results, but when you focus on the people, they will get you the results that you need. And that's where I think a lot of people really go wrong. So what I would say in terms of if you were in that interview, then just really show your values, show your authenticity, show that selfless commitment that you have in order to watch other people succeed, help other people succeed, develop others as well, and also show that you're willing to develop as a leader as well, and showing that vulnerability, as you said before.
Great advice. What about on the other side of the table? For hiring managers, people that are the interviewers, what's one leadership quality that they should probe for that isn't easy to see on paper, on somebody's CV, for example?
I just think the number one thing is authenticity. And I really just think, and I know some of the things do become quite repetitive, because I do say this to people, is like, it's simple, but it's not easy to do. So everyone knows the answers. Everyone knows, it's the same as anything. Everyone knows how to get a six pack, but it's not easy to do it, right? Like, we know what we need to do, but it's not actually easy to do it. And being a good leader, in theory, is quite easy. Like, you read these leadership books and go, just lead by example, just do this and do that. Oh, well, yeah, I can do that. But actually putting it into practice is a different thing. But I would say always be authentic. And there's a quote that I read in a book is, be your real self, not your ideal self. And as I said before, if I was to sit there and be interviewing someone and I could see they were bluffing it, and they were trying to be someone they're not, I think that I would be able to see straight through that. But when someone genuinely comes up as their authentic self and they showcase what their values are all about, then you're going to spot that straight away. And that is a really, really strong attribute to have, because we've all seen the people standing up, trying to be the leader, trying to be the vocal person, and you can see straight through it. Nobody is buying into that. Nobody is inspired by that. And that sort of like makes me think, right, how can I now implement that into my coaching to show people that that's not the thing to do? So this conception of, I need to do this to be a good leader, well, it's actually not. It's usually the opposite. I want people to be their real self, not their ideal self.
Great. Luke, this has been brilliant. Thank you for sharing your insights on leadership, management, and building confidence. I hope all of our listeners have learned something today from the advice that you've given. To our listeners, remember that interviews and leadership roles aren't just about skills. They're about authenticity, clarity, presence, and confidence. Mastering those ingredients can be the difference between being considered and being chosen. Luke, thank you once again. Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into The Right Ingredients. Be sure to subscribe, share, and join us next time. Luke, once again, thank you.